I'm not quite sure what it is, but there's just something about the unknown that just freaks me out. Something about that shadow out of the corner of my eye that just gives me shivers. Something about those voices that you seem to hear, but nobody else does. Welcome back to the swamp, my friends. It's good to see that you made it back for another episode. We are once again sharing stories from viewers just like you, who claim they have experienced some allegedly true, creepy, unexplainable, and paranormal events. If you have a story you would like to share in a future video, whether it's a paranormal story or something else, be sure to submit your story at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I'd love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. Stories like yours that help keep this show going. Now, without further ado, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you're new, and settle in for some creepy stories that'll freak you out tonight. I have had a few unexplainable things happen in my life so far. I'm 22 now, but this story is about something that had happened when I was only 7 years old. We had recently moved into a new home. It was just me, my sister, and my mother. This home was essentially given to us for free because it was a transitional housing program for families coming out of a domestic abuse situation. I'm assuming that's why the things we heard and saw had taken place there. It probably had a lot of bad energy from past families and bad situations stored there. Anyways, shortly after moving in, I would sometimes notice very cold spots in the house. Usually, they were in specific areas, especially the basement, that I rarely went into. And whenever I was in these colder areas, there was always a strong, weighted feeling, like barbells on top of your shoulders. That's how it all started anyway. But over the months, things got progressively worse. After about 3 months of things in the house moving and falling over by themselves and glass shattering, things would be moved to a different spot or something like that, the voices started. First, it was my sister to hear them. And then, it was me. Then even my mother, although my mother always tried to brush it off to keep us calm. I remember she had asked me to go into the basement one day to get her some towels. Obviously I was already scared of the basement, but this particular time I had felt a very off feeling coming from down there. I had only taken a few steps down the stairs by the time I felt like I was hearing whispers. I really didn't want to go down there, but the light switch was at the bottom and I was hoping once I turned it on, I would feel a lot less worried. I finally made it down to the bottom and turned on the lights, but they just wouldn't turn on. I flicked the switch up and down, up and down. The light bulb wasn't burnt out either, which seemed to happen down there more than anywhere else in the house. Sure, could be faulty wiring. Still hearing those whispers and still in the dark, I panicked and began to walk. I don't know if this was just me, but I feel like if I'm ever in a situation that I shouldn't run probably, I should probably acknowledge whatever forces may be in play. And I should probably confront them, or maybe things will get worse if I don't do that. Maybe they get worse if I do. I don't know. As I made it to the top, the door slammed itself shut before I could get out. I began pounding and screaming for my mom because I couldn't get the door to open. I didn't stop screaming because I was worried that if I did, I'd hear something coming and couldn't get out the words to tell her what happened. Once I finally did, minutes later, she felt awful and responsible for what happened because she was the one that sent me to get the towels. She never made me go down there again. That definitely was the scariest situation I had ever been in up until that point. But it didn't end there. Throughout the year we lived there, we still dealt with the voices and things that moved around. The last thing I will mention is towards the end of us living in the house, we started spotting a man in our house. He was transparent to a point, and he would just walk from room to room, passing through the hallway beyond our kitchen. That's how we mainly saw him, because it would happen as we sat down for dinner. We believe he was the one moving things around. We had all gone out to a friend's house for the day, and once we returned home we thought someone had broken in. Things were knocked down everywhere, more so than usual. Even scarier, Once we had gotten back to my sister's room, her computer chair was moved to the center of the room, her TV had been placed on top of it, all of her perfume bottles had been laid out in a circle around the chair. This shook us to the core. Shortly after, we had a priest come and cleanse the house in hopes of it helping, even though we weren't very religious, just desperate. It seemed to help in small ways, but it never ended the issues. Because of that, we moved shortly after. This isn't the only supernatural thing I've experienced in my life, but definitely the most prominent and constant. Thanks, and I hope you enjoy the story. My name is Cody, and I am from Wichita, Kansas, but when I was 19 I took my first of many trips to Thailand. I ended up spending around 5 years in Thailand, and fell in love with the country, culture, and food. Anyway, let's go back to my first trip there. I just landed and took a taxi to the hotel I had arranged in Bangkok. Culture shock, and the vibrant city with motorcycles swerving in between traffic, and people out and about. I was in awe of this amazing place. When I got to my hotel, it was around 1 in the morning, and even though my senses were wired up and my excitement was high, I was exhausted after traveling so long and being delayed in Japan. I crashed out on my stomach. Now, here's where the madness begins. I heard a loud slam, which came from the sliding glass door open on the balcony. It was raining and thundering, but my bedroom light was going very bright and dim, making a buzzing sound, louder when it got bright, and then the sound dying as the light would dim to almost black. I thought, what the heck? And pushed myself up to get out of bed to see what was going on. I immediately felt the pressure of 2 hands push me down to the bed hard. At first I thought I was being robbed. The hands pushed me down and shook me, with every shake felt as I was going deeper and deeper into the bed. It was squeezing the air out of me, and all I could do was exhale. The light flickering, and on the wall, I could see a shadow of what appeared to be a woman, because I could see long hair. I finally managed to catch a breath and screamed, "Stop!" Immediately the light went off and the pressure in my back left. It was quiet. Dead quiet. I turned on the light and saw my front door was still locked and the sliding glass door was still open. I was on the 8th floor, and the balcony had bars on them, so there was no way someone had broken in. The next day I told a monk at the temple that I had visited about the event, and he gave me an amulet necklace of a popular monk. I never had an incident in that room after this, and I still wear the necklace every day. Another time I was on the roof of a building with my Thai friend. He went downstairs to grab some smokes. It was a clear night, and even in Bangkok with the pollution, I could see the stars very clear. But something up high, a blue light, an orb of sorts, was bouncing through the sky coming straight to me. The hair on my neck stood up and I got chills. The light bounced by me about 5 feet away and kept going. It went through the fence that was surrounding the roof and just bounced up and down through the fence and out into the other buildings, disappearing behind the next apartment complex. I don't know what it was, nor am I sure I want to know, but Thailand seems to be full of stories like these, and I assume it's because they have more power, as there are a lot of spirits and demons in that lore. Just my theory though, and my experience. Other than that, Thailand is heaven on earth. I'm a single man, who sometimes goes to strip clubs here in Portland, Oregon. They used to have a club called Jiggles, but that was shut down and bulldozed away, and they built other things on it. I've seen ghosts and had many paranormal experiences since I was 11, when I had a near-death experience. So, I was at the place called Jiggles, and I'm looking towards the main stage, and there's a very attractive young woman I've never seen before, doing some sort of dance. Then a huge big husky shadow man walked right between me and the girl on the pole. I thought at first it was just a trick of the light. Clubs are usually a little dark, so I figured some really husky dude was just in a spot with no light, going on his way. But he was darker than a million midnights. I don't mean dark skin. He was a pure shadow being. So I moved to the right a few feet, and he moved and blocked my view of her again. So I moved to the left a few feet, and he moved and blocked my view once again. This went on for a little while. He wasn't floating, but walking. I approached and noticed even clearer this guy was not a guy, but a shadow. A very deep, dark shadow being, husky like a football player. I move again to the left, it moves. I move again to the right, it moves again. The shadow is blocking my view of this very attractive young girl twirling around on a brass pole. So I look at her, and then a feeling of absolute sadness comes over me, like nothing I've ever experienced before. What did it feel like? It felt like the cosmos was empty. It was the saddest feeling I had ever felt. A feeling of complete despair and sadness and loneliness. A terrible feeling. At that instant I knew, don't ask me how, that she was going to die soon, and that the shadow being was some sort of angel of death. I cannot describe it any better than that. I thought to myself, should I warn her? Should I tell her to prepare? I thought, how is this going to happen? Maybe I can prevent it. So I thought. Because one can only access the Akashic records when one's mind is blank, allowing the information to come in. When I did that, I got the flashes of boyfriend in a car wreck and drinking alcohol. So I thought either she was going to get drunk and die in a car wreck, or a drunk is going to hit her, or her boyfriend is going to kill her when he is drunk. So after her song I went up to her, and I passed right through the shadow. It felt weird, like a deep coldness. Was I scared of the shadow? Not necessarily. I don't know why, because the place was filled with people. Had it appeared to me in the room at night? Yes. I would have been scared. But here, it didn't scare me. I approached her and asked her for a dance. I paid for it, and we chatted for a few minutes. She seemed extremely sweet, a very attractive young woman. I was thinking, should I tell her? Should I warn her? I thought it best not to tell her she would die soon, but try to interpret that as something different. I thought she might take that as a threat, so I thought the best I could, trying to think of how I could tell her this. I wanted to save her if I could, so as she said, well, I need to get back to work, I said, can you do me a huge favor? She said, what is that? I said, promise me that you will never get into a car with a drunk person driving. Do you promise? She smiled and said, oh, I'd never do that. That's it, and I left. About 3 weeks later, I heard about her fate. Her boyfriend took her to a bar, got drunk, and they were driving home. He went too fast around a curve, lost control of his car, and it spun and hit a tree on the passenger side, her side. They said it killed her pretty much instantly. The tree crushed her skull. He ran out into the woods and hid. The police had to come out with a dog to find him. They tested his blood and he was legally drunk. To this day I have no idea why the husky shadow being didn't want me to see her. I can only guess. He didn't want me warning her, maybe. Well, I did warn her, and as you can see, it didn't do any good. I have listened to all of your guys' stories for a while. That has inspired me to tell my own. I have many paranormal stories, but I'll leave those for a later date. The story I'm going to tell you is not necessarily paranormal, but is something unexplainable. I don't really know how to explain it, so this is the best I can do. This happened a while back, so let's get started and you can be the judge. I live on the west coast of Canada, British Columbia. I do not live that far in the woods, but close enough to have bears, cougars, coyotes, and a lot of other small critters. So, like I said, this happened a while back. My neighborhood was just being developed and there were not many houses around, especially where my family and I were living at the time. Our house was one of the new houses made, and in total, only made up 3 houses that are on this block, as the rest were still being built or were just a pile of dirt. There are trees all around us in your typical forest environment, so there weren't many people around living in the area yet. So, one hot night I was laying around in bed, and my window open just listening to the nearby river. It was relaxing. I could hear crickets, frogs, and nearby dogs barking in the distance. I found it difficult to sleep with the heat, since I'm the type of person who definitely enjoys the cold. All of a sudden, this howl came out of nowhere. Immediately, I sat up in my bed and just listened with complete shock. It was so loud that it silenced the entire area. I mean, everything went quiet. The river was the only thing you could still hear. The dogs, the frogs, and the crickets went quiet and didn't make a sound afterward. I have never heard anything make this noise in my entire life. I grew up watching nature channels and being around wildlife, and there's nothing in my area that should have made this noise. So with my heart now pounding out of my chest, I slowly went to my window, which I am on the second floor, and closed it and shut the blinds, hoping that whatever it was out there didn't see me. I haven't heard that noise since that night, and since that night my neighborhood has grown, with more houses being built. During those times, my mom and dad also had weird things happen to them. My mom would walk down to the end of the streets, where the road ends and the woods begin. He would say that the dogs would start growling and staring off into the woods, with my mom not hearing or seeing anything that would trigger that. She didn't care, she just turned around and walked quietly back to the house whenever that happened. My dad would say that he would find weird structures made of big branches in the woods where people won't go. There are trails nearby, but my dad never really walks these trails, as we usually just find and follow game trails or make our own. I don't know what it was that night that I heard, but I do like to think that it was just a Bigfoot trying to sleep in and just telling the neighborhood that it was bedtime. Thank you for listening to my story. It's not the scariest story, and like I said, I have other tales of my encounters with other things, so maybe you'll hear from me again. Thank you, and I love listening to your channel when I'm driving home from work at night. These events happened to me during the summer of 2006. I grew up in a small town in southern Oregon. I was a sophomore in high school, and I used to hang out with my friends quite often, just like most teenagers would do. Where I lived was towards the edge of the town, with a heavily wooded area. Just around the corner of where my house was, there was a secluded trail that led down to a river that my friends and I discovered a while back while exploring. We loved our new spot and would go there all the time to fish or swim. To get to the spot, you had to basically enter the thick briar and blackberry bushes that we bushwhacked into a decent trail, and there was kind of a steep incline going down. Once you got to the bottom, it was fairly flat. Nice, sandy beach area between the trees. One time, while swimming and hanging out, we decided to stay a little longer than usual, so we decided to make a fire as the sun was beginning to set. We were laughing and telling jokes around the fire, when all of a sudden we started hearing sounds coming from all around us in the bushes. There was no way it was an animal, because the way the bushes were moving all around, and we heard what sounded like sticks breaking. The ground was crunching all around us. We were freaked out, and ran up the trail and left thinking we were probably just freaking ourselves out. We basically got over it, and it didn't really happen again for a long time. Plus, that was really the only time something weird would really happen, until this last event anyway. I was once again at the river spot with a few friends doing normal teenage stuff like swimming and smoking a little weed, which back then was the norm for us. After a few hours of swimming and such, we were talking and leaving. We were going to go back to a buddy's house, as it was going to start getting dark in a couple of hours. We all agree, but my friend Josh and I want to smoke another bowl first. So my friends Brad and Chris say they are just going to head out and meet up with us at their house because they wanted to stop at the store along the way. We agree and tell them we will catch up with them soon. Josh and I sit there talking for a bit, passing the pipe back and forth to each other, when all of a sudden we hear what sounds like an Indian drumming sound coming from all around us. It starts out light and then grows louder and louder, and it's surrounding us in every direction. The chanting starts up and this still freaks me out. I don't really know how to describe it, as it was almost like an Indian chanting but more sinister. It was all around us. We both looked at each other, rather frightened, and booked it out as fast as we could up the trail and out of there. When we got back to Brad's house, we told them what happened, and of course they didn't believe us. We couldn't think of an explanation for that experience, as there were no houses or anything around there. Plus we both knew what we heard was not a delusion, as we had both heard it. I never went back to that spot after that incident, and probably never will. I know that Indians once lived in that general area long ago, and I feel their spirits didn't want us there, or maybe something like that. Sorry if this story wasn't what you were hoping for, but it was truly frightening for me. The story that you're about to hear is a very long one. My name is Jordan. This happened to me when I was around the age of 12. I started seeing these people who weren't really there. Let's call them shadow people. They would say these things to me about hurting myself or other people like my friends and family, but I ignored them every time. One day it got worse. I felt weird and I said something horrible to my friend on Valentine's Day of 2018. Her name was Charlotte. I said this on the way home from school, so she got freaked out. The other person who was sitting next to her name is Wendy, was also freaked out when I said those things. So the next day at school I was called into the principal's office because apparently I had threatened her. So I told them that I was sorry for that and that it wouldn't happen again, even though I don't remember saying what I said. So they said we could go, but she had me stay behind to try and talk to me more. I didn't know what was going to happen, so I started crying, but then I remembered the shadow people. So I told my principal about them, and it turns out that they wouldn't leave me alone, and when I was at school, they wouldn't leave me alone either. Soon, I saw one at the window. It was on the roof of my school, so I told my principal about it while still crying. They brought the police officer into the office. I still kept crying, so they got the school guidance counselors, and I told them about it. They didn't seem to believe me, though. They thought I was crazy or something. They had my parents come in so they could talk about it. Then after that, they said I could go home early. So I and my parents left. We didn't say anything in the car, but when I got home, my parents talked about everything with me. I told them about the shadow people. I told them how I can see and hear them, but other people couldn't. I thought that my parents thought that I was crazy. They had me draw a picture of what they looked like, and I told them about their leader as well. I told them about how they tried to take me to be one of them, and that their leader wanted me to be the next to him, at all times. So I could be the next leader, I guess. I explained how every time they tried to take me, I would say no, and then eventually they would leave me alone. After I told my parents that, they looked like they had just seen a ghost, so they decided that they should have my therapist come in that same day. One thing I forgot to mention is that the people at my school said that I didn't have to come to school the next day if I didn't feel like it, because of what happened. So the next day I told my dad that I didn't want to go to school. He said that it was fine and called the school and let them know. They understood, and I just stayed home that day. Also, the thing I forgot to mention is that the day was a Thursday, so that meant the day I stayed home was Friday. After that, nothing else happened. I didn't see the shadow people anymore, and I didn't hear them anymore. That all changed a few months later in August, when the next incidents with these shadow people arose. It happened days before this main incident. The shadow people were back and they were telling me to do these things again, and they tried to take me again. Keep in mind, I was still only about 12 at this time, but this incident happened when I was at a family vacation. My family and I went to get in the pool when I started feeling strange, as I did on Valentine's Day. From what my mom, dad, aunt, and uncle told me, I was just standing in the pool not doing anything, not saying anything. So they just told me they had to get me out themselves. So once they did, they put me on my uncle's hammock and started asking me questions. What they told me is that I started saying that I wanted to kill myself and hurt myself, and they said they started getting scared and worried about me. Soon after, I felt normal again. My parents and aunt and uncle were hugging me after that, so I hugged them back. To this day, I don't remember saying or doing any of that stuff I supposedly did. I still feel like I was possessed by one of the shadow people both on Valentine's Day and my family reunion. That said, nothing else really has happened with these shadow people. Me, my parents, aunt, and uncle try to forget about that day. This goes twice as much for me, as I was just really in a fog. I was potentially possessed, I guess. I don't know what it was, but I'm very glad that it hasn't happened again. My story takes place a couple of months back in December. My family and my boyfriend were going up to a lake trip in Arrowhead, California to celebrate my little brother's birthday. We had rented a cabin and planned to stay there a night. Since it wasn't really snowing in Lake Arrowhead, we decided to spend the day at Big Bear Lake, where it had been snowing previously. We spent most of the day there, and before we knew it, it was starting to get dark out. We decided to get back to the cabin. It was about 9 p.m. when we arrived. We were all pretty hungry, so I volunteered to make some bacon-wrapped hot dogs. The cabin was 2 stories tall. The bottom floor had all the bedrooms, and the second had the living room, kitchen, dining table, and bed. While my boyfriend and all the kids were downstairs, my dad was in one of the restrooms while my mom was in another. I was basically alone on the second floor, while I was facing the stove. The stairs were located directly behind me. I felt a presence. I believe I even saw it in the corner of my eye. I thought it was just one of the kids coming up from downstairs to vex me, but I turned around and there was nothing. I just brushed it off as being one of my baby hairs being brushed by the wind or something. I told my mom once she got back and she agreed with me. I told my boyfriend and the kids about what I experienced just to try to scare them. It definitely worked. I soon regretted it though, because no one wanted to sleep in their own bed. There was 6 of us and all 5 of them wanted to sleep in the same bed. I wasn't even all that scared, and I was the one who experienced it. Anyway, my younger sister soon got into the shower. After only a couple of minutes, I hear her scream. I rush inside the door, because it wasn't locked, and see the shower curtain had fallen and she was struggling to put it back up. She seemed pretty frightened and wanted me to stay in the restroom with her after that. When the time came to go to sleep, no one wanted to sleep in their own bed again. My boyfriend and little brother were supposed to sleep in this room that was on the other side of the cabin. The thing is, no one wanted to sleep in there. The room was cold. Yes, it was winter, but it was even too cold for that. The heaters were on most of the time. It was just a weird room. No one ended up sleeping in it. The next morning, my boyfriend was upstairs eating breakfast while I was downstairs cleaning up. All of a sudden, I hear the kids scream and my boyfriend run downstairs saying the power went off. I don't know. I honestly just laughed it off. I don't know why it was funny to me. Well, basically, that was the end of our trip. We went home after that and everything seemed to go back to normal. A couple of weeks later, my sister searched up the place we stayed at. The place is called Antlers Inn, located at Twin Peaks. What she found was kind of disturbing. The news article said, "Antlers Inn death, not a homicide." The picture showed the exact cabin we stayed at. Apparently a handyman who lived there died of natural causes in September 28th of 2011. The crazy part is that they at first thought it was a homicide. If you search up Twin Peaks Antler Inn and go on news, I'm pretty sure you can still find the article. Well, after learning that, I now know what I experienced was probably real, and this man was probably some creepy guy trying to watch my sister in the shower. He most likely also made the power go off that morning. Maybe he died in that one room, the coldest room in the cabin. Anyway, that's my little story, and thank you Swamp Dweller for sharing it. I really appreciate it. Hello, my name is Seth. When I was a kid, I had a paranormal experience. I was young and was around 7 or 8. Keep in mind, I had trouble sleeping by myself, so I'd often have my mom sit with me when I would try to fall asleep. Now, this night my mom was out of the house for a reason I can't seem to remember. Sometime that night I woke up in the middle of the night and was scared, so I went to my sister who was staying with us at the time and asked her to sit with me. Keep in mind she was in her 20s and had a kid of her own with her, so she said yes. Just let me put Call, her son, on the other side of the bed. As she was doing so, I put my head in my hands because I was just tired and a little spooked because of the darkness. When I looked up, I was as terrified as ever at what I saw. It was a person wrapped in bandages from the head down and was shaking rapidly, and what sounded like muffled screaming. I bawled and wailed for my sister and she came running out of the room asking what was wrong. I could only mumble words because of how scared I was. To this day I have no clue what it was. I'm 17 now and still wonder what it could have been. My mom and sister say the house was haunted and there have been other experiences, but those will be for another time. Anyways, thank you for letting me get this off of my chest. Thanks for listening to these creepy and unexplainable stories sent in by viewers just like you. These were some truly mind-boggling stories that had me scratching my head. That last story may have been short, but it's definitely an interesting thing to see. A bandaged being that is very squirmy. Huh. I would love to know if any of you have any ideas what that could have been. If you have ever had an experience with the paranormal yourself, or something that you just can't explain, I would love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. You can do that by submitting it at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I would absolutely love to share your story with everyone here. It helps keep the show going on a daily basis. If you enjoyed these stories, please hit that like button, as it really helps me out in the YouTube algorithm. If you're new to the swamp, what are you waiting for? Why not jump in and join us? Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss a video. I upload them almost every single day, on all things natural and supernatural. If you're not on YouTube all the time like some people are, you can download your favorite Swamp Dweller scary stories and bring them with you wherever you go. You can do that on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, Podbean, and pretty much everywhere else you find your favorite podcast. A big thank you, as always, to all of the swamp dwellers out there dwelling in the swamp with me. I couldn't do this without you guys, and I really appreciate ya. I would love to know what story tonight was your favorite in the comments down below. It would be really appreciated. I'll see you guys soon with another creepy video.